Hi, this chapter, which is chapter 10, is relatively short, but once again has very important concepts involved. Basically, we talk about the entire control process. Over the previous 3 or 4 chapters, we talked about different components of issuing, receiving, storing, purchasing. But let's put it all together. And basically, the control process consists of 5 steps. First, you want to set specific standards in the form of goals or expected results. The example I like to use is setting food cost percentages. And I've said this before, I'm a big proponent of letting every single employee know what the goals are. If every employee knows, there's a higher chance everyone gets involved and more invested. You need to measure actual operating results, and what that means using forecasting, using budgeting. If you find out you're a little bit off, why is it? You got to measure your actual cost, your theoretical cost. Analysis, just think about the word analysis. What does it mean? Analyzing. You compare expected results with actual results. Once again, look at your budget, look at what you project. If you feel you should be running at 26% food cost and you're actually running at 27% food cost, that means there's a 1% variance. Now we're going to analyze what happened. And then taking corrective action if necessary. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not, and I'll cover that a little bit later on as these slides progress. And number 5 is the big one, and many managers and owners overlook this concept. Evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken. So many times we have managers and owners, oh, I'm going to fire this person. Oh, we got to get food cost up to here. We got to correct this. We're serving too many people. We're having too many walkouts. We have too much food waste. Well, how effective is a corrective action? It's almost like when you correct your child. You can take as many things away from that child, and if nothing's working, you better reevaluate the corrective action. And it's the same thing in the restaurant industry. Now, sources of food and beverage cost standards. And when I say sources, a lot of times managers use their intuition, their experience, actual numbers. Some examples include, industry averages. One great reason for joining a restaurant association, it's a great resource. It's amazing how many people don't use the resources incurred or involved in the restaurant association. As a quick side note, not to put a plug in for anything, I highly advise you get really actively involved in your local restaurant association. The benefits are outstanding. You can look at food and beverage percentages on past financial statements. If last year was at 26.5% food costs, year before 27.2, year before that 27.1. So you get a feel. It's like, okay, my food cost should be between 26 and 27 or 27.5%. And of course, you're assuming your menu hasn't changed and a lot of the external factors haven't changed as well. Same thing for the next slide, or excuse me, the next point. Operating budgets, either current or past budgets. How much money do you have to spend? Sometimes if it's a great year, you get more in the budget. Sometimes if like back in 2009, 2010, nobody was traveling, then you have to squeeze the bottom line a little bit and kind of make some cuts, and that affects what your percentages and your margins are going to be. And of course, using technology, look in the ideal, we'll call the in-house cost is taken from the POS system, your point of sale system. It'll tell you, okay, every time you serve 20 of these items, you should be making this profit, you should be spending this amount of money. But as I've said in previous slides and previous chapters, your ideal or theoretical costs are not always the same as your actual cost. There's always that human error. Now, let me give you a primary example of what I'm talking about when I say comparing standard costs with actual cost. And once again, standard costs can be synonymous with theoretical cost. And let's use this example. Let's say you have a bottle of Pinot Noir and it costs you $20 and it should yield 5 4-ounce servings. In other words, you should get 5 pours out of that bottle to finish that bottle. And let's say you charge $10 per glass. So by basic math, 5 servings times $10. So if you serve the entire bottle, you've made $50 total with the 5 pours. Now, the beverage cost percentage would ideally be, theoretically be, $20 because you paid $20 for that bottle, divided by $50, that's the amount of sales you made from that bottle, so that equals 40%. Thus, every time you serve a drink, you're making a 60% profit because it costs you 40% to serve that drink, therefore 60% is yours. But if you discover you're only making 55% profit after taking inventory, you therefore have a 5% variance. In other words, 5% of that profit's getting wasted somewhere. And that kind of segues in the next slide. What do we do about it? And here's some questions you need to ask yourself. Is the variance between standard actual costs from this period significantly different from other periods? In other words, is it always 5% off? Was it just off by that 1 month, that 1 week? Is it related to how a certain bartender pours and no one else? And here's a key one here that I've highlighted. Is the amount of the variance great enough to warrant corrective action? That is key. Is it worth really delving into, you know something, I'm losing, 40 cents every time we serve a wine, or I'm losing $1 every time we serve a wine. Multiply that by 52 weeks. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. But are you getting repeat business? So in other words, let's say that the customer loves that 5-ounce pour instead of the 4-ounce pour, and they come back. You're making less of a profit margin, but you're getting repeat business, so they're coming back. So that's something you need to measure. And could there be theft involved? There's always a potential for theft. It's amazing how bottles magically walk out of a bar. And could the changes in work processes be a cause of the variance? That's a key component too. I probably should have highlighted that one. Sometimes people just change menus and they change formulas and they change recipes because it sounds great. Oh, we should serve this, or instead of a Long Island iced tea, we should have an Italian nuclear blast. By the way, that's a great drink I made up, by the way, related to the Long Island iced tea. But with that being said, it's a very complicated drink to make. And if you misrepresent 1 or 2 ingredients, that can cause a variance in your food cost or beverage cost percentage. Now, some factors to consider before taking any corrective action. You got to judge the probability for success. What does that mean in layman's terms? Sometimes employees have what I call selective listening, and their abilities only go so far. You can't teach a short order cook how to cook 4- and 5-star meals. It just simply is not going to happen. So maybe you try and correct the action, it's just not going to happen. And sometimes you assess the implementation cost. Maybe to correct that action, it may just cost too much money to correct it. So you basically say, okay, you know something, I'm going to accept that there may be a 5 or 10% variance per item on this because that's just the way it's going to be. Review what's worked in the past. Sometimes you might be what I call a transition manager. You may have only been there for 6 or 7 months. Check the notes. Ask other employees. Ask other managers and other properties that have the same type of problems that you have. Don't be afraid to collaborate. And obviously, this is common sense. Find the best possible solution. I kind of laugh at that because that's easier said than done. And here's the bottom one that a lot of managers and owners have a major problem with. Accept compromises. Sometimes, once again, if it's your restaurant, it's your bottom line, or if you're a manager and you are responsible for the profit margin, it's very tough to accept compromises. You're looking at the numbers like, you know something, this should be a 60% profit margin item. I'm only getting 52%. What in the heck can I do? And it's driving you nuts. Sometimes you have to accept it. You know something, I'm still doing well. I'm still making a profit. Employees are happy, guests are happy, and let's move on. And that should be taken on a case-by-case situation. Now, the key word in this component is taking effective corrective action. It's more likely to be effective if managers communicate all changes to affected staff members and explain the reasons for the changes. It's just like raising kids. If you tell kids, hey, don't go to the park, and don't tell them why, well, guess what? They're going to be rebellious. They're going to be ticked off. And that's improper communication. You need to tell them why. Now, if they're 2 or 3 years old, different story. But when they're 8, 9, 10, become teenagers, they need to explain a couple things. This part I've highlighted. Affected staff members are given the opportunity to provide feedback on the changes. I have a secret for you guys. Managers and owners aren't always right. They don't always have the correct answers. In my position, I learn something new every day. So make sure that you get feedback and then get a solution based upon information. I've said this before. Knowledge is power. And make sure training is available for the affected employee. If the employee is doing something wrong, he or she may not have even known this. I've been to many restaurants where I've had cooks doing the same thing wrong over and over and over for years, simply because no one ever told them differently. And of course, you need any needed tools and equipment that are readily accessible and employees know how to use them. Sometimes managers and chefs, they fall in love with like new toys. For example, at our Marriott, we acquired a Turbo Chef a year and a half ago. It was about almost $10,000. And guess what? Only 2 people knew how to reprogram it. I had to learn on my own. The one person was eventually fired, and the other one was transferred. No one knew how to change the equipment, so when we changed our menu, we're like, wait a minute, how do we program this in here? So if you're going to make any corrective action, make sure that people know how to use the tools for any potential corrective action. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed the chapter.